My name is Jessica Carter. When I saw the family photo posted online, everyone raising their wine glasses in front of the lakeside cabin my grandfather left behind, I didn't feel angry. I just smiled. A cold, quiet smile. Because I wasn't invited. Not a single message. Not one phone call. And the sign in the photo read, "Celebrating Brittany, the sole heir of the Carter family." But I was the one who paid the property taxes on that land for 3 years. The one holding my grandfather's handwritten will, with my name on it. Have you ever been quietly erased by your own family, cut out of everything you helped build only for them to cheer like you never existed? If you've ever been cast aside by your own blood, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Because right after this, I'll tell you how I took everything back, not by yelling but with a silence heavier than any promise. I still remember that afternoon, December of 2008. My parents sat on the living room couch, staring blankly at a notice from the bank. The property was about to be foreclosed. Carter Realty, my father's pride for 25 years, was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy after the housing market crash. My mother sat beside him, clutching the frayed edge of her sweater. No one said a word, but the despair in the room spread like fog. I was 29 then and had just received a large bonus from the financial firm I worked for. I was going to use it as a down payment on my first apartment. But instead, I quietly pulled out a check from my purse and laid it on the coffee table. "I'll cover the mortgage," I said, steady voice, no hesitation. My mother burst into tears, holding my hand as if afraid I'd change my mind. My father, stunned for a few seconds, just nodded. No one said thank you. Not because they weren't grateful, but because in that moment, pride had no place. I didn't blame them. I understood. At the time, Brittany was living in a rental apartment with her boyfriend. She had just lost her job at a makeup store and had nearly $18,000 in credit card debt. Every time I called, Brittany laughed, "Don't worry about me, I'm young, I'll figure it out." But not long after, she moved back home with a designer purse, a fluffy pillow, and a little Shih Tzu she insisted she rescued, not bought. My family welcomed her like nothing had happened. My mother even added another authorized card on her account so Brittany could use it in the meantime. Me. I kept paying the bank every month. Stayed quiet when Brittany showed off her sale-find shoes that still cost $200, while my dad had to lay off 3 employees to make ends meet. I did it all without asking for anything in return. Because deep down I still believed that sacrifice would be seen, that loyalty would eventually be rewarded with trust. I remember my grandfather looking at me after dinner one night while I was reviewing the company ledger. He said, his voice low and steady like wind under the eaves, "It'll all be yours. Because you're the one holding this family together." I just smiled and bowed my head. I didn't think twice. I didn't need paperwork, his words were enough. We made it through that storm. Because of the money I gave, because we cut back on spending, because I rewrote the financial plan for the company. My father let me attend meetings with the accountant and the legal advisor, but he still called me his good girl, never partner. My mother would say, "Don't overthink it, honey. Your family, everyone sees your value in their heart." Meanwhile, Brittany started blogging and later launched a makeup tutorial channel on YouTube. She had a bright smile, a sweet voice, and a fresh look that viewers loved. I was happy for her when her first video hit 50,000 views. But then I noticed, in all her stories about her journey to success, she never mentioned how the family had supported her. Or more accurately, how I had. 1 year later, my grandfather died unexpectedly in a highway accident. He had been driving home from his old woodworking shop out in the suburbs, where he liked to craft pieces in his free time. The news came on a rainy evening when my father stepped quietly into my room, red-eyed, holding a trembling phone. I froze, not from personal grief but because I realized a door had closed before I could step through it. His assets, including the lakeside cabin, the Pine Hill property, and his company shares, had not yet been transferred according to his plans. I remembered him saying he'd update the paperwork during his next health check. But that never happened. The funeral was brief. Brittany sat in the front row, clutching white lilies, eyes glistening. In her speech, she called him, "the first man who taught me how to be strong." I sat in the back. I didn't speak. No one mentioned me in any of the tributes. No one recalled who brought him meals, cut his hair, checked his blood pressure each day. That was me. After the funeral, there were no talks of inheritance. No meetings. No legal letters. I thought maybe everyone was still grieving. Maybe I should wait. But then the little things started to happen. Drops of water wearing down the stone of my patience. One morning, I saw Brittany post a photo of herself sitting on the porch steps of the Pine Hill cabin with the caption, "My childhood home, now my creative sanctuary." I called my mother. She said, "Your sister's staying there for a while. She needs the quiet to write." I didn't ask again. But from that day on, I began writing everything down. Every detail, every date, every offhand comment. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I realized that if I didn't keep track, no one else would. And if I didn't stand up now, there'd be nothing left to hold on to. I was working when the phone rang. Unknown number. Denver area code. I nearly let it go to voicemail thinking it was another telemarketer, but something made me stop. Jessica Carter? A man's voice. Clear, slightly raspy, polite. "This is Alan Royce. I was your grandfather Harold Carter's personal attorney." My heart skipped. That name, that voice, I hadn't heard it before, but my grandfather's name hadn't been spoken in a long time. I was reviewing some old files in my private archive, and I came across a document I believe you should see. If you have time, I'd very much like to meet in person. I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. I agreed after a brief pause. He sent me the address, an old gray house in a quiet West Side neighborhood. I drove over the next afternoon, nerves unsettled. Royce was an older man with white hair and a light brown suit, sitting behind a worn oak desk. His office was lined with thick, dusty books, but meticulously organized. When I entered, he stood up and shook my hand with calm dignity. "Carter, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair in front of him. "I'll get straight to the point." I nodded, resting my hand gently on my purse. "I found a handwritten draft of your grandfather's will. It was sealed in an envelope marked, 'To be delivered upon meeting with attorney.'" He opened a drawer and pulled out a faded file, placing it gently on the table and sliding it toward me. I opened it. Inside was a sheet of yellowed paper with handwriting I knew by heart. My grandfather's. Just a few lines, and I recognized it instantly. He wrote with his left hand, the letters slanted, evenly spaced, the pen pressure heavier on the words that mattered. "In this document, Mr. Royce said, Harold Carter clearly states that the Pine Hill property, the lakeside cabin, and all his shares in Carter Realty are to be transferred directly to you, Jessica Carter." I looked up at him, heart pounding. "This was never submitted?" He shook his head. "No. It was his final draft before notarization. According to my notes, Brittany, your sister, came by to pick it up, saying she would handle the formal process on behalf of the family. But I never received the official version." That sentence hit like a slap. I remembered the day clearly. Brittany wore a white floral dress and carried a soft leather bag. She said she was helping Mom sort through Granddad's old files. "You want me to take this to get notarized? Save you the trip." I, foolishly, trusted her. I nodded. She even smiled and said, "Don't worry. I'll do it right." And then, no one ever mentioned it again. Not once. I thought maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he didn't finish the paperwork. But he hadn't changed anything. Brittany had. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Is this document still legally valid, Mr. Royce?" He nodded slowly. "It has Mr. Harold's signature along with 2 witnesses. While it hasn't been officially notarized, the court may still consider it valid, given the right context and credible testimony." I gently flattened the edges of the paper, my chest heavy. "Do you have a copy?" "I do. And I'll provide you with a certified one." "But Jessica," he paused, his voice lowered. "If this document was deliberately withheld and if someone used other information to replace or fabricate new paperwork, then this isn't just about an inheritance dispute. It suggests fraud." I closed my eyes for a few seconds, not from shock, but because it confirmed what I hadn't dared to name. "Do you want to move forward?" I looked at him. There were no tears left in my eyes, only fire. "I don't want to fight. But I won't let someone erase my work. Not again." Royce nodded like he'd been expecting that answer all along. He handed me a certified copy, along with a receipt detailing the date of discovery, storage, and witness verification. As I stepped out of his office, the cool evening air hit my face like a reminder. What I thought was lost was still here, quietly waiting to be reclaimed. And if I didn't speak up, everything my grandfather left behind would remain in the hands of someone who had never tried to keep this family together. I tightened my grip around the folder. Inside me was no longer the pain of a daughter abandoned, but the clarity of someone ready to set things right. Not with rage, but with truth. That night, I sat quietly in front of my laptop in my small apartment. A warm amber light spilled from the desk lamp onto the papers I'd brought back from Alan Royce's office. My grandfather's will, more than just an old document, was final confirmation that I hadn't imagined my place in this family. I opened the Colorado State Land Records website. The homepage was familiar, but tonight, every click carried both dread and determination. I typed in every address I knew our family owned: the lakeside cabin in Pine Hill, the property in South Denver, and the land where Carter Realty's office stood. My heart pounded as the results came in. I started with the cabin. The records were clear. Current owner, Brittany Carter. Transfer date, 3 months ago. I scrolled down to view the transaction details. The property was transferred from Mr. David Carter to Brittany Carter as a family gift. A legal arrangement, yes, but one that typically required careful documentation, especially for tax purposes and asset oversight. I opened the next file: Carter Realty's office building, where I had worked late nights for 2 years after the crash. Owner, Brittany Carter. Another gift from Mr. David Carter. This one dated 2 months ago. I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. No announcement. No discussion. I looked at the contract date. The exact day my father was hospitalized with a mild stroke. I remembered clearly, I was the one who drove him to the emergency room. He squeezed my hand, exhausted but still smiling. "Don't tell your mom. She'll panic." I opened the attached file to view the signed deed. When the screen loaded, I froze. David Carter was clearly signed at the bottom. At first glance, everything looked fine, but I had learned to pay attention to the smallest details. I zoomed in on the signature. My eyes narrowed, my chest tightened. Something wasn't right. I printed the file and retrieved an old document from my father's drawer, a tax return form he'd filled out by hand last year. I placed the two signatures side by side. To an outsider, they might look identical, but not to me. I grew up watching my father sign checks, letters, lease agreements. I knew his D in David, always written in the American style with a sharp backstroke, tight loop, barely rising above the line. The D on this deed was rounded, slanted to the left, more like British cursive. I held both papers under the light. It wasn't a huge flaw, but it was undeniable. I exhaled slowly and picked up my phone to call Brittany. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't need explanations, I needed evidence. I pulled up the third property, the small lot in Aurora that my grandfather bought years ago as a long-term investment. New owner, again Brittany. The transfer was done via remote notarization. The same questionable D. I documented every detail, printed all files, and marked the key dates. Not because I wanted a confrontation, because I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I called my mother. She picked up faster than I expected. "Hi, sweetheart. How's your day?" I didn't dance around. "Mom, did Dad go to a notary on March 14th? There was a brief pause. "Why do you ask?" "Because that's the day he was in the hospital. I took him to the ER at 6 a.m. I remember it clearly." Her silence stretched longer. "I don't know really. Maybe they handled the paperwork beforehand and sent it online. I was more worried Brittany would have to go alone." I didn't reply right away. I heard someone laugh in the background. "Brittany, are you sure that's Dad's signature?" Asked slowly. "Jessica, what are you trying to prove? Everything was done legally. Brittany's just helping the family." "Helping by wiping my name off everything? You're being too sensitive." I shook my head gently and hung up without another word. That call wasn't about answers. It was confirmation. That they were ready to defend Brittany, even with the truth staring them in the face. I turned back to my desk, gathered the documents into a thick stack. On top, I stuck a yellow note: "Signature analysis, start here." I had no other option left. My silence over the years had become empty space. space that others had filled with their version of the truth. But this time I would fill it, with records, with memory, with justice. I looked down at my name on an old, faded deed, once printed on every company directory, every financial report, every plaque mounted at the entrance. Where was it now? I thought of my grandfather, his unsteady handwriting near the end of his life, writing to me, "You're the one who keeps your word." I lowered my gaze. Yes. And now it was time to keep that word. Not for them. For me. I scrolled through my old contacts, past names I hadn't seen in years, until I found it. Erica Mayfield, forensic examiner. Erica and I went to the same high school, then took different paths. I went into finance. She studied criminal science and later became a certified handwriting and signature expert for the state courts. We hadn't kept in close touch, but if there was one person I could trust with this, it was her. I sent a simple message. "Erica, this is Jessica Carter. I have something serious I need your help with, if you're still working in forensics." She called back in under 10 minutes. Her voice was as firm as ever, with that slight rasp at the end of her sentences, just like back in our debate team days. "Oh my God, how long has it been? I thought you'd moved to the East Coast for good. If we're meeting again, it must be serious, huh?" "It's not simple," I replied. "But you're the only one I trust to do this the right way." Erica didn't press further. She sent the address of her office in Aurora, a small building tucked inside a quiet commercial plaza, sharing a floor with a law office and a notary service. I arrived the next morning, carrying my documents inside a black portfolio, feeling like I was holding what was left of my family's dignity. Erica greeted me with a warm smile, but her expression quickly turned serious when I laid the papers on her desk. She slipped on a pair of white cotton gloves, opened each page carefully, and used a professional magnifier to examine the ink strokes, outlines, and angles of each signature. "Do you have comparison samples?" she asked. I pulled out 2 older documents, a health insurance form and a financial statement from last year, both signed by my father. Erica compared each letter, measured slant angles, and analyzed the pressure and consistency of the strokes. "See anything strange?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. She tilted her head, placed 2 signatures side by side under the soft amber desk lamp, and I heard her exhale quietly. "Jessica, at least 2 of these 4 documents have highly questionable signatures." I sat up straight, my throat suddenly dry. "The D in your dad's name, David, right here," she pointed, "has a loop that curves to the left. That doesn't match his original style. And the way the dot is placed over the I in Carter. Your dad usually dots it cleanly, directly above the letter. This one is off to the right, almost like the handwriting of a woman or someone trained in old-fashioned script." I stayed silent. Erica removed her gloves and leaned back in her chair. "Do you suspect who might be behind this?" she asked directly. "Brittany." She gave a slight nod. "I can't identify the forger without their handwriting samples. But with what I have, I can prepare a preliminary analysis, enough to warrant a deeper legal review." I nodded. "I need that report." Erica paused, locking eyes with me. "But Jessica, if you push this further, if you bring it to court, this won't just be a civil dispute. This is potential document forgery. It could lead to criminal charges." I said nothing. She understood my silence wasn't fear. It was weighing something bigger. "Are you ready?" Erica asked again, her tone gentler. "I don't want to see my sister prosecuted," I replied. "But I can't stay quiet when my grandfather's will is being ignored. When my parents' names are on documents that may not be real. And when I've been erased from everything." Erica nodded once more. "All right. Then we do this properly. The report will have an ID number, date, and my signature. You'll need to submit a copy to the court archive, and you might want to hire an attorney to file for a hold on any related asset transfers." I carefully wrote down every step she mentioned. Each line felt like another layer of armor, not for a fight driven by anger but by truth. Before I left, Erica placed her hand gently over mine. "Jessica, this is huge. But I've seen people like you, quiet ones who keep everything running until they're pushed out. I'm not telling you whether to forgive or not. I'm just saying, you deserve to hear the truth spoken in your own voice." I nodded, eyes stinging. "Thank you. I'll handle the rest." Outside, the clouds were rolling in. I stood by my car, still holding Erica's freshly printed report, and felt the wind sweep across my face like a warning. Everything had begun to shift. Not from conflict, but from one simple decision: to never let myself be erased again. I didn't go home after seeing Erica. Instead, I stopped by the bank, the one I'd sent payments to for years to help my parents maintain the family properties. The young teller with tousled blonde hair asked which time frame I wanted. I said, "The last 7 years." She looked surprised but didn't question me. She nodded and got to work. When I held the thick statement, nearly 200 pages, the first thing I saw was the transfer from September of 2017, $2,340 for property taxes on the Pine Hill house. I remembered that month clearly. I had to cancel my Oregon vacation to cover it. My father called saying, "We're tight on cash just for now." I didn't ask why. I wired the money the next morning. Then October the next year, $1,785 for the main house's insurance. Then April, $3,200 for a new roof after a storm. One payment at a time, none with my name in the notes. But I had saved every receipt and confirmation email in a folder called Family. I went home and sat in my quiet living room, spreading the statements across the floor. A breeze slipped through the window, lifting the first page. I bent down to pick it up and realized this wasn't about tallying up money. It was about finding justice in every number. Next, I looked into the credit account my mother once added me to. They told me the account was closed 2 years ago, but as an authorized user, I could still request transaction history. I signed the form, feeling like I was summoning the ghost of my own past. The PDF was nearly 40 pages long. I skimmed to October of 2021, $28,600 for a pearl-colored Lexus NX. Recipient: Brittany Carter. Credit guarantor: Lorraine Carter. But the primary card holder? Jessica Carter. I remembered that day. I was at a conference in Dallas. My mother called asking me to temporarily activate the card for something urgent. I didn't ask. I trusted. I saved every page, numbered them carefully, and created a new folder on my computer titled Hidden Assets and Debt. The name felt cold, but every line inside it was a blade I had taken without realizing it. Just as I was about to take a break, my phone buzzed. A message from Brittany's old number. A screenshot I had saved last year when she posted a photo in front of the Pine Hill house. In it, she had messaged a mutual friend. "She doesn't care about those old houses, she has a career. The inheritance is just a formality." I opened that screenshot, zoomed in, reread every word. Not because I needed proof, but because I needed to remind myself. This disregard wasn't accidental. It was calculated. That night, I went back to my grandfather's old house. It had been locked up for months, now used by my mother for storage. I still had the spare key. The hallway light flickered when I turned it on. I walked slowly into his room, the one where he used to sit reading the paper, where the old AM radio would hum with morning farm reports. While sorting through some old files, I opened a drawer beneath the oak desk. Inside was his old Panasonic answering machine. Dust-covered. Heavy. I carried it out, plugged it into the last working outlet in the room. The red light blinked. One unheard message. I pressed play. The speaker crackled, then his raspy but steady voice filled the dim room. "Ellen, it's Harold. I left my handwritten draft in a brown envelope, marked for Jessica. Help me schedule notarization next week. I want to make sure it all goes to her. He keeps the company, the cabin, the name. Brittany's not strong enough. Make a note. Oh, and don't tell Lorraine. She'll say I'm overreacting again." The machine stopped. I couldn't breathe. I replayed it. That last line. Don't tell Lorraine. I wasn't sure if my mother ever knew. But Brittany absolutely did. Because she was the one who picked up that brown envelope, and never mentioned it again. My hands trembled as I unplugged the recorder and held it to my chest. This wasn't just evidence. This was a voice from the past. The final message my grandfather left for me. Not on paper. Not in a look. But in his own voice, reminding me, "You didn't imagine this. You weren't wrong." I left the house just before midnight. On the way home, the wind slipped through the cracked window. I let it tangle my hair, one hand still gripping the voice recorder. Dinner was held on a Saturday evening at the tail end of autumn, when the air had started to turn crisp and red leaves blanketed the walkway in front of my parents' house. I'd received the message from my mother 3 days prior. Family dinner. Brittany has something important to share. Would be lovely if you joined us. No apology. No explanation. Just a polite yet commanding invitation. I didn't respond immediately. I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder titled, Return. I arrived on time. Brittany's white SUV was already parked out front, gleaming under the warm golden porch light. I stepped inside, carrying the document folder I'd prepared over the past few nights. The living room was elegantly decorated, and the faint scent of cedarwood candles drifted through the air. Brittany stood near the dining table wearing a blush silk dress, hair curled, makeup flawless, like she was prepping for a live stream. "Jessica, you're here," she exclaimed, stepping in for a light hug, cheek never touching mine. I nodded slightly, avoiding eye contact with my mother, who was by the oven stirring a pot of sauce like everything was perfectly normal. My father sat at the head of the table, eyes fixed on his wine glass. His face looked more worn, but his gaze still darted away when it landed on me. I pulled out the chair already set for me. On the table were 7 place settings, 2 bottles of red wine, a platter of roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, and a cake that read, "Congratulations, Brittany." I didn't ask anything. I waited. After dessert was served, Brittany stood up, wine glass in hand, her voice rising clearly and confidently like she was addressing a crowd. "I know the past few months have brought changes, but tonight I want to share some wonderful news with the family." She paused, glanced around, then continued. "I've officially launched the Brittany Carter Foundation, a nonprofit focused on supporting young women in entrepreneurship, especially in creative and media industries." My mother sighed with pride. My father clapped, slowly but steadily. Brittany held her head high, eyes glimmering. "And to kick off the project," she said, "I've decided to dedicate the majority of my inheritance to the foundation's initial funding. Because I believe when one woman succeeds, the entire community rises with her." I didn't smile. I didn't clap. I set down my glass and gently lifted my folder onto the table. "You might want to look at this before you continue," I said, my voice low but loud enough to silence the room. Brittany frowned. My mother furrowed her brows. My father looked up. I opened the folder and laid out each item. The signature analysis from Erica Mayfield, my grandfather's handwritten letter, bank statements, the recording from the old answering machine, and a report on unauthorized credit use. Each document was placed neatly on the table, evidence impossible to ignore. "This is a handwriting analysis showing at least 2 recent property transfers do not bear our father's authentic signature," I said, eyes fixed on Brittany. "This is my grandfather's letter, never publicly disclosed, where he names me as the rightful heir." I pulled out the audio file, a converted digital copy, and set it on the phone on the table. One tap and my grandfather's voice filled the rose and wine-scented room. "I want to make sure it all goes to her. He keeps the company, the cabin, the name. Brittany's not strong enough." Silence settled over the room like a thick layer of dust. My mother froze, lips pressed tightly. My father braced against the table, hands trembling. Brittany leaned back slightly in her chair, but her eyes worked hard to stay composed. "What are you trying to do?" she asked, voice steady. "I'm not trying anything," I replied. "I'm simply putting things back where they were meant to be." "You're breaking this family apart," my mother snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "Everything's fine now. We can handle this privately." "It's no longer private," I said, taking out the final document, a letter from attorney Alan Royce addressed to the court. "Mr. Royce has officially filed a petition to freeze all Carter family real estate transactions due to evidence of signature forgery, removal of lawful heirs, and suspected elder manipulation." Brittany shot up. "You're taking this family to court?" I looked at her. No rage, just resolve. "No. You already did. I'm just putting my name back where it belongs." My father finally spoke, voice weak. "Jessica, you don't have to push this." I turned to him. "What did you say when Granddad wrote that letter? How long have you known?" He didn't answer. My mother glanced at him sharply, almost a warning. Brittany blinked and looked at me with a stare I couldn't quite read, a blend of defiance and fear. I gathered the documents and slid them back into the folder. "You can move forward with your foundation," I said to Brittany, "but you'll do it with your own money, not with what you took through deception." I stood pushed in my chair. Before turning away, I paused and looked each of them in the eye. I've been quiet for too long. But silence doesn't mean consent. And now it ends. The air that day was colder than usual, even though sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Denver County Courthouse. I sat in courtroom 3, hands resting lightly on the neatly organized folder in front of me. My gray wool coat draped over my shoulders like thin armor. Beside me was attorney Harlan Myers, recommended by Mr. Royce. His eyes were sharp, but his words were few. He nodded when he saw me in position. Everything was ready. My parents sat across the aisle, composed like unwilling defendants. My mother wore an olive knit dress, her hair neatly brushed, hands clutched around her leather purse, eyes avoiding mine. My father wore a light gray suit, his expression clouded, and his eyes duller than the last time we met. Brittany sat between them, back straight, cream blazer pressed, lips tight, eyes flashing every so often like she was holding back fury waiting to strike. Judge Townsend entered, a middle-aged woman with a firm face and silver-rimmed glasses. Her hair was tied neatly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it held authority, and the courtroom fell silent on its own. We are here today to review the motion to temporarily freeze all assets related to Carter Realty and affiliated real estate, based on evidence of possible document forgery and inheritance violations. The petitioner is Ms. Jessica Carter. Respondents include Mr. and Mrs. David and Lorraine Carter and M. Brittany Carter. Attorney Myers was the first to rise. No flowery opening statements, just precise citations of each piece of evidence. Erica Mayfield's forensic report, the grandfather's voice recording, the unpublished letter, and the irregular transfer records, all verified. I sat silently, feeling my heartbeat echo with each phrase he delivered, not from fear, but from knowing that every fact was a cut into the truth buried far too long. And this, Mr. Myers said, placing a small USB on the table, is an audio recording of a conversation between Ms. Brittany Carter and Mrs. Lorraine Carter, legally obtained from an in-home device and authenticated by our legal tech team. The judge nodded. The clerk activated the audio. Brittany's voice came through, sharp, slightly mocking. She won't sue. She loves being the good daughter, too much. Let her mop the floor for me, it's no big deal. A soft sound followed. I turned to see my father flinch slightly, like someone had pulled the rug from under him. My mother clutched her purse tighter, head tilted downward. The judge signaled for the recording to stop. She removed her glasses and looked directly at Brittany. "Ms. Carter," she said, "would you like to respond to what we just heard?" Brittany stood. Her voice was tight, her face no longer composed. "I was just joking. I didn't mean anything by it. This is all a misunderstanding. Every transaction was done with my parents' consent." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And what about the signatures suspected to be forged on the property documents?" I didn't handle the legal paperwork," Brittany said, her voice rising. "Everything was managed by the family attorney. I just followed instructions." "So you didn't sign any of the transfer documents?" I don't really remember. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't." The judge turned to my parents. "Were you aware of the handwritten will by Harold Carter, the late father of David Carter?" My father remained silent. My mother answered, her voice noticeably softer. "We did hear Harold mention he would leave most of it to Jessica. But when he passed, there was no official document presented." "Did either of you know Brittany had taken the envelope of documents left by Harold and failed to deliver it to the attorney?" My mother looked at Brittany. Brittany clenched her jaw, eyes locked on the floor. "We didn't know that," my mother replied quietly. The judge nodded and wrote something into the record. "The court has reviewed all evidence, including testimonies, forensic reports, and lawfully obtained audio recordings, and finds clear signs of misconduct in the process of property transfer. Until the investigation is complete, all assets tied to Carter Realty, the home at Pine Hill, Associated Equity Holdings, and any funds connected to Harold Carter's estate will be frozen." There were no cheers from my side, no triumphant smiles. I simply clasped my hands, silently watching my parents and my sister. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother tried to keep her face composed, though her eyes shimmered with moisture. Brittany shot to her feet, nearly yelling. "I'm the one who brought pride to this family. I'm the one people remember." Who is she? Just the shadow doing back office work while I. The judge raised a hand, her tone steady but commanding. Miss Carter, this is not a stage. If you cannot maintain proper conduct, I will have you removed from this courtroom. Brittany bit her lip, slumped back into her seat, her face flushed, eyes burning. The judge continued, calm but firm. We will assign an independent oversight party and initiate a formal investigation into potential forgery, concealment, and asset manipulation. The next hearing will take place in 6 weeks. Until a final ruling is issued, no party is permitted to transfer, liquidate, or alter any asset related to the contested holdings. I stood with Attorney Myers, feeling my footing more solid than any time I'd stepped into that building. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to confirm. The truth had spoken, and this time it didn't require me to scream. It was strong enough to silence the entire room. I returned to Pine Hill on a gray afternoon, the clouds hanging low over the distant mountain ridge, and the lake as still as a mirror, refusing to reflect anything at all. The dirt road to my grandfather's old cabin remained rough with scattered gravel, wild lavender now dry and pale on both sides, still clinging to their familiar scent. I walked slowly past the chipped white picket fence, resting my hand on the wooden sign above the door. The Carter Cabin, 1962. The cabin stood unchanged, still upright, still familiar, but something inside me had shifted. I used to come here as a caretaker, the good granddaughter hoping to preserve the breath of someone long gone. Now I returned as a rightful heir, not because of the deed, but because of the voice of the man who once taught me that value isn't found in applause, but in knowing when to stand. While filling the ceramic vase on the kitchen counter, the one my grandfather had picked up at a summer market, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. McAllister, the neighbor who lived 3 houses down, holding a yellowed envelope. "Jessica," she said, her glasses foggy but voice still clear. "I found this in the old church mailbox a few days ago. The mailman said it had been returned because no recipient could be found. But when I saw the handwriting, I figured it had to be from Harold. And I thought, maybe little Jessica ought to have it." I took the envelope, hands slightly trembling. On it, my grandfather's handwriting was unmistakable. To Jessica Carter, the one who remembers without being reminded. A faded postmark blurred the year, but I guessed it had been sent not long before he passed. I thanked Mrs. McAllister, walked her to the gate, then returned inside. I sat in the wooden chair by the window, where my grandfather used to read every morning, and carefully opened the letter. The paper smelled of age, but the ink remained clear. "Jessica, if you're reading this letter, things have likely changed, and perhaps we ran out of time to say all that needed saying. But I want you to know this before any judgment or division gets in the way. You don't need permission to have value. You don't need approval to be recognized. You've always carried the heaviest weight in silence, and I saw that more than anyone. When the family chased applause from outsiders, you were the one keeping the Carter name grounded. Not through prestige but persistence. And maybe I didn't say it enough while I was here, so I'll write it now so you won't forget. Don't let anyone erase your name from this family's history. Don't let kindness be twisted into grounds for being cast aside. You don't need to shout. But if there comes a time to speak, do it like someone who knows exactly who she is. I believe in you. Not for what you've achieved, but for how you've lived, without calculation, without noise, but always in the right place. Love always, Granddad." I don't remember how long I sat there after finishing the letter. I only remember the light outside fading from pale gold to deep gray, and the lavender scent drifting in the air, intertwining with every stroke of ink. Some words don't need to be said twice. Reading them once is enough to change how you see yourself. I folded the letter gently and placed it in my grandfather's old desk drawer, where he used to keep electrical diagrams, utility bills, and handwritten reminders. In that drawer, I found a small scrap of paper like an unfinished checklist. Transfer land title, recheck Pine Hill documents, ask Alan about Jessica's reserve fund. I laid that note beside the letter, then stepped out onto the porch. Dusk had fallen. The wind creaked the porch beams softly, each sound whispering something from the past. No one needed to declare me the rightful heir anymore. I didn't expect their apologies or bowed heads. Because here, where the lavender rose still held traces of my fingertips, where my grandfather once sat sharpening pencils for me to draw, everything had been clear for a long time. I just needed to open that letter to remember. And to sit here once more, to know I was never truly on the outside. I didn't return to court for the final hearing. That morning, I woke as sunlight slipped through the thin curtain of the upstairs room. The cabin at Pine Hill was still as if it were holding its breath, save for the soft chirping of birds at the forest's edge and the faint scent of toast I'd forgotten in the oven the night before. On the table sat a stack of documents I had already signed, arranged neatly next to a glass of water and my mother's silk scarf, the only thing she left behind during her last visit, though she hadn't knocked on the door. Attorney Myers stood in for me. In the closed-door session that lasted more than 2 hours, he made it clear, I agreed to relinquish a portion of the estate, specifically non-operational shares in Carter Realty and the profits from the Southern Commercial lot, with one condition. All inheritance and transfer records must be made legally transparent, and my family, before the company board and financial advisors, must publicly acknowledge that I had been removed from the estate under dishonest circumstances. I didn't need them to say the words, "I'm sorry." I just needed the truth to be recorded for what it was. The family agreed, grudgingly. According to Myers, my mother remained silent throughout the session, nodding only when the court confirmed the commitments would be entered into the record. My father said nothing except for one sentence. If she wants this to be over, let it be over. And Brittany, she didn't sign immediately. It wasn't until the judge reminded her that if she refused, the investigation would proceed and might lead to criminal charges, that she finally signed her name at the bottom, without ever raising her head. When Myers texted me to confirm it was done, I was sitting by the large window behind the kitchen. The lake beyond shimmered in the late sunlight, the water reflecting the pale gold of the approaching winter sky. I set the phone down without reading further, feeling no triumph, no relief, just an unexpected calm, as if something inside me had closed without needing to be locked. On the table was a small photo frame I had just placed there, holding my grandfather's handwritten letter and an old photo of the two of us standing in the lavender field. I remembered those afternoons when he would lead me between the rows of purple, explaining how soil breathes and why sometimes when pushed into a corner the best thing you can do is take a step back, to see the other way out. I stepped onto the porch, a wool scarf draped loosely over my shoulders, a warm cup of tea in hand. In front of me lay the open patch of land where my grandfather once planned to build a small greenhouse. I would do that for him. Not for utility, but because I wanted to plant something again. Something new rooted in everything old. I no longer cared if anyone called me the good daughter. I didn't expect that anymore. Because this time when I chose not to return to court, when I signed away the assets that technically should have been mine, I didn't do it out of weakness or softness. I did it to end the cycle of schemes, of resentment, of too late apologies. Keeping my name intact in the record was enough. Living quietly in the home my grandfather left me, under the porch he once repaired plank by plank, was enough. And looking at myself in the mirror each morning without anger, regret, or the need to prove anything, was enough. I don't know what you would do if you were in my place. Would you fight to the end to take everything back? Or would you stop as I did, when you realized that keeping your peace mattered more than counting every piece of what was lost? I don't expect everyone to agree with my choice. But I hope somewhere in this story you recognize something familiar. A quiet sacrifice, a family bond that proved far more fragile than it seemed, and a decision to walk away from a war not because you lost, but because you'd had enough. What do you think? If it were you, which path would you choose? I would truly love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Because sometimes we don't need the same ending, we just need to understand each other a little more. And if this story touched something inside you, please follow this channel to join me on more journeys ahead. Stories that may not be loud or perfect but that speak truthfully about family, betrayal, and the ways we each learn to rise without losing ourselves. See you in the next story.